and we are going to take a look at the discriminant in the quadratic formula. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. So let's take a look at what we're doing today. So if you're following along in the book, it is going to be 9.5, right? We're still at 9.5 and we're day 3. Okay, and what we're looking at today is the discriminant. Now, please note that I'm not saying discriminate. I'm saying discriminant. Okay, to discriminate means to, right? Discriminate means to act negatively against a group of people. We're not doing that. We're not discriminating against people. Discriminant is something that's in the quadratic formula. So let's start by writing out the quadratic formula, nice and big. So make sure you get that down on your paper nice and big. So the discriminant is actually a part of the quadratic formula, and it tells us really useful information. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today is like the quadratic formula is more useful than just the solving for x. Okay? And so what we're going to look at today is what I'm circling in red. This is called the discriminant. 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 Okay, it's kind of a weird word to say because it almost feels like you're mumbling, right? Discriminant. Okay, so that in red is what we call a discriminant. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit. Now, another thing here is that this right here actually tells you the axis of symmetry. And because I never want to like lie to you guys or leave things out, the axis of symmetry is really important when we want to graph a quadratic. Okay, because and you guys are going to learn about that in Algebra 2 when you're doing more graphing and doing stuff like that. Actually, I take that back. I think we're going to get a little bit into the axis of symmetry, but not a lot. You definitely are going to do a lot more in Algebra 2 with axis of symmetry. Okay? So, again, this tells us about the axis of symmetry, but we're not going to be really focusing on that today. We are going to be focusing on the discriminant and what that is going to be doing. Okay, so let's take notes on the discriminant. Okay, so the discriminant so what does the discriminant? The discriminant, it tells us how many solutions there are for x. Okay, so it tells us how many solutions there are for x. Now, as you guys go further and further in math, these are called roots. Okay. Now, don't worry about that right now. I'm just trying to give you guys heads up for down the road. So when we say how many solutions there are for x, these are called the roots. So we say it's the roots of the quadratic. Okay, and I'll explain a little bit why they call them the roots. It actually is a pretty logical thing. Okay, but basically, this is very visual based. Okay. So when we say how many solutions there are for x, we have to remember that we set ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. Okay. So that's what's going on here. We have to remember that. So remember how it's set equal to 0? So when we say solutions, this is what we mean. Okay. So a quadratic looks like a U. So graphically, if I go like this, okay, so this is a quadratic. So if I take a look at a quadratic, this right here, right, is the x-axis, but it's also y equals 0. Okay, it's y equals 0. So notice how in this graph, there is one solution where y equals 0. Okay, so there's one place. Yeah, I can slow down. Sorry, I didn't mean to be going too fast. Okay, so again, we set, right, this is standard form. Notice how we set it equal to 0. So that's y equals 0. So when we graph this, it's like a U, right? The letter U. See how we have the letter U going down like this? Okay, so we have the U. And notice how this U only touches the x-axis once, right? So that means there's one solution where y equals 0, right? There's one place on this graph where this output equals 0. Okay, that's what this is saying, right? So the blue is the output, and there's only one place where that equals 0, and that's right here. Okay, now remember how I said I was going to explain, like, why do they call it roots? Well, you can think of the x-axis as being like the ground. And what goes into the ground of a plant? The roots, right? So if this was like a flower, this is where its roots are. So that's kind of where the word root comes from. Kind of cool, right? All right. Okay. So there's one case, right? So there's one solution. And then we have another example. So I'm just drawing a little coordinate plane. You can tell it doesn't have to look good. Okay. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my U and I move it down a little bit. Okay. So again, this is where y equals 0, right? Y equals 0 here. And you can see visually, there's now two places, right? There's this place right here and this place right here where there can be. So this is two solutions where y equals 0. Okay, so we've been solving these now, but we didn't really know what this looked like visually, right? Like this was really abstract. It was just a formula, and we were just solving that formula and getting answers. But this is what it looks like. So it's the quadratic looks like a U shape. In this case, right, we just have one x equals. That would be it. Okay, there's just one solution. And we often found, right, this is a repeated solution. And that's something that you guys will talk more about when you get to Algebra 2 and Pre-Calc, right? Like, what's that repeated solution mean, and so on. But for right now, all we're worried about is there's just one solution here. Here, do you see how the U kind of dips below? So there's going to be two solutions, right? One where it's coming down and one where it's going up, okay? Which, now remember, last class, right, we looked at some warm-up problems that didn't have any solutions. So what does that look like? Well, no solution. Right, now notice how this one, we kind of shifted the U down. So the opposite of shifting it down would be like shifting it up, like this. Okay, so notice here, does it ever cross y equals 0? So take a second, get this down. So it's just a crosshair, right? Doesn't have to look good. You can tell mine don't look very good. but this u is now moved up a little bit. We call that a translation. Okay, so it's translated up. And it's now not touching the y equals 0 or the x-axis at all. So it's not touching. So if it's not touching, that means there's no roots, there's no solutions, there's nowhere where the output equals 0. So then this is no solutions. Okay, so it's no solutions. Okay, so this is what we're really going to focus on, is graphically, right? What the heck does this mean? And we're gonna spend some time towards the end of this semester graphing these, right? So this is kind of an intro into taking a look at what do quadratics look like graphically. And then you guys are going to spend more time on this in Algebra 2 and in pre-calc. Okay, so if we take a look here, right, we have one solution, that's where it touches the x-axis once. We have two solutions, that's where it touches the x-axis twice. And no solution, it doesn't touch the x-axis at all. So I'm going to stop there just 1 second. Does anybody have any questions about this? Right, so notice it's y equals 0. We set it equal to 0, and y equals 0 happens on the x-axis, right? That's when y equals 0. So really, we're solving for all the x's when y equals 0, right? So this one has one solution, this has two solutions, and hopefully this gives you kind of like a visual of when we're solving for the quadratic formula, what that looks like. Okay, now, this is the visual guide, so now we're going to tie it all together. Okay, we're going to tie this all together with everything. Okay, so I ran out of room. So I'm going to flip my page over, start at the top. Okay, so what does this mean for the quadratic formula? Well, the discriminant, we said, is b squared minus 4ac is the discriminant. Okay, so b squared minus 4ac is the discriminant. Okay, and if you guys forgot already, over here, I'm just going to say, okay, remember, x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of, right, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Oops, I need to zoom out just a quinky dink. There we go. Okay, so I kind of drew it, so I just wanted to really highlight, right? This is what we're talking about. So within the quadratic formula, we're looking at this red piece, right? The b squared minus 4ac. That's our discriminant. Okay, that's our discriminant. And we have to remember, and I know I'm writing this down again, right? It tells us the amount of solutions. The number of solutions. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to show those graphs again, but we're also going to do it with this little number detail. So it turns out, and this has to do with square roots, right? So to get two answers, that means the square root has to be a positive number. So when b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, okay, when it's greater than 0, or you can say b squared minus 4ac is positive, right? This top one is math language. This is English, right? So math language says b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, which is the same as saying b squared minus 4ac is positive. Okay. Then there are two solutions. Oop, there we go. Okay. So when b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, then there are two solutions. Okay, so I'm going to draw a picture with this again. right? So I'm just drawing a little coordinate system. It doesn't have to look nice. That means it looks like this. Okay, so what we're saying is that if the thing underneath the square root is positive, right, greater than 0, then there are two solutions. Okay, because a positive square root is going to give you two possible answers, right? Algebraically, if the square root of a positive number, there's going to be plus or minus that. Okay, so that's why there's two answers, because if it's square root of a positive number and plus or minus, then there's two possible solutions. Okay, so that's one scenario. Okay, so when b squared minus 4ac, the discriminant, right? This is called the discriminant. So when the discriminant is greater than 0, then there are two solutions. Then when the discriminant, so b squared minus 4ac equals 0. Okay, so when b squared minus 4ac equals 0, then there is one solution. Okay, so when the discriminant equals 0, then there is one solution. So what does this look like graphically? Right? Again, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It's just a visual representation to help us understand what we're doing. This is going to be, right, when it touches the x-axis once. Okay. So when the discriminant equals 0, we're only going to have one solution. Now, algebraically, when you guys are doing the math, that's when you get a repeated answer, right? Like you get x equals 2, x equals 2. Okay. So there's only one answer, right? 2 is the same number as 2, so there's only one answer. So algebraically, when we're doing this, you're going to get the same answer twice. Okay. So we have the discriminant is greater than 0. We have the discriminant is equal to 0. I bet you guys could guess what the next one's going to be, right? Because we have a pattern going here. And that is when the discriminant is less than 0. And that's in English, we would say b squared minus 4ac is negative. Okay, so when b squared minus 4ac, that's our discriminant, is less than 0, right? So we can also think of that as the discriminant being negative, right? Because if you're less than 0, you're a negative number. Then there is no solution, right? So algebraically, you guys remember what we got on our calculators, right? It said domain error, it said error, it said, I can't remember what Desmos said, right? There was some sort of error, right? So that is telling you there is no solution. So if you're like, I don't know if I'm typing this into my calculator wrong, or if there's really no solution, you can always check the discriminant and say, hey, is there going to be a solution here, right? Now, you might be thinking like, Krept, why would we need to know this? Because have you guys found doing the quadratic formula takes time, right? It takes time to write it out. It takes time to type it into your calculator, and then you have to do the positive and the negative version. You want to be able to look at the discriminant and be like, hey, if there's no solution, I don't need to do this work. Okay? Or if there's just one solution, I don't need to type this into my calculator twice. Right? So this is a tool to not only help us use the quadratic formula more quickly, but as we get going and as you guys get to higher and higher level math, you guys are going to find that these tools are going to be really helpful for breaking down more complex problems. Okay, so we're just kind of doing an intro today and seeing what that looks like. What does this look like visually? So what does this look like visually? So again, it doesn't cross the x-axis. There's no solution. Okay, there's no roots, right? That's where that thing, there's no roots. It doesn't touch the ground. There's no roots going on there. Okay, and how are you guys doing so far? We're doing okay? I'm trying to make this visual, trying to make this, so there's three possible like things, right? So either it is two solutions, one solution, or no solution. So what we're going to practice today is we're just going to practice if I give you something that you don't necessarily need to find the answer, but can you set up the discriminant and find how many solutions there are? Okay, so let's take a look. Let's do a couple of examples together and see where we are. All right, so let's take a look at example 1, and I'm going to zoom back in here. Okay. So, how many solutions does, and then we're going to take a look at this. We're going to have x squared minus, plus, that's an easy fix. So x squared plus 8x minus 3 equals 0 have. Okay, we want to know how many solutions this has. And so this is a relatively simple one, and we're just going to work on the mechanics of this. So notice how it doesn't say solve. We don't need to find a value of x. That's not what we're here for. Okay, so if we're not here to find a value of x, right, all we're going to do is first, is this in standard form, right? Is everything on one side, is it equal to 0? And yeah, right, everything is on one side. And I can just double check here, right? So everything is on one side and it's equal to 0. So this is in standard form, we're good to go. So if we're in standard form, we're good to go. I'm going to find my a. So remember, it's the number in front of the x squared. So how many x squareds do I have? I have 1. My b would be 8, and my c is going to be -3. Okay. Now, we don't need to solve, right, using the quadratic formula. All we need is the discriminant, and the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac, right? This is the discriminant. Okay, that's all we need. So we're going to check the discriminant to see how many answers we have. Okay, so I plug things in. I'm going to have 8 quantity squared minus 4 times 1 times -3. Okay, so all I'm doing, right, is I have my A, B, and C. I'm going to plug them in, right, into my discriminant. Then you grab your calculator and you think to yourselves, okay, I have 8 quantity squared. Oops, sorry, my lighting's bad. Minus 4 times quantity 1 times quantity -3. And I get 76. Okay, so if this is 76, right, then we think how many solutions do we have? So 76 is greater than 0, or you can think it's positive. Right, 76 is positive, and then that means we are going to have 2 solutions. And I'm boxing 2 solutions because that's what the question asked. It said, how many solutions do we have? And we have 2 solutions. Now, notice, and I really want to drive this home for people, if you're really clever about this, this number doesn't matter. All we're looking for is this number positive, 0, or negative? So if you can just quickly look at this and see how you have a negative times a negative, that's a positive. So you have a positive number plus a positive number. If you can see that, then you already know there's 2 solutions. So using your calculator is kind of the sure way of doing this, but if we kind of are a little bit more clever with this, we can do this super quick. And that's actually how this is designed. It's supposed to go super quick. Like I can just say, hey, this is a positive number, and then I have a negative times a negative. This is a positive number plus a positive, that's a positive. This has two solutions. And that's how it's meant to be. It's meant to be a shortcut to quickly see how many solutions you have. Okay. So again, now does that mean you guys are going to be super quick in doing shortcuts? No, some of you will, some of you won't. But everyone can do this, right? Because we're just typing these numbers into the discriminant and seeing if it's positive, 0, or negative. All right. Does anybody have questions here before we move into you guys trying one? All right. Well, let's try one. See how you guys are doing. So we're going to try one on your own. Okay. So let's do 2. I want to do 2 of them because it's kind of fun to do 2. So try one on your own. Let's do. I'm going to do. How many do I want to do? Let's do 3. So let's do how many solutions? So let's do, my first one is going to be 9x squared plus 1 equals 6x. And then I'm going to have b, I'm going to have 2x squared minus 3x minus 1 equals 0. Let's just do 2 for right now. So I'm going to have you guys figure out how many solutions those have. And I think 3 minutes is going to be just peachy. Let's do 4. 4 minutes. And if you guys have questions during this time, let me know. Now remember, it has to be in standard formation. It has to be in standard form for you to be able to get your A, B, and C. All right, so let's take a look at these and see how we did, okay? So the first one, right, was a little bit of a tricky trick because it wasn't in standard form, right? Not everything is over on the left side. So that's what I'm going to start with first, right? So we have to get things to standard form before we start using any part of the quadratic formula. So 6 minus 6x, that's going to give us a 0 on the right. That's what we want. And then with the ordering, right, we put that negative 6x in the middle. So this is going to be our ax squared. This is going to be our bx. This is going to be our c. So I get a equals 9. I get b equals negative 6. And c equals 1. My discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. That's my discriminant. Okay. And so I'm going to replace things. So I have 6 quantity squared. Oh, negative 6. That's important. It was a negative 6, wasn't it? So negative 6 and then minus 4 times 9 times 1. And in my calculator, I'm going to go negative 6 squared and then minus 4 times 9 times 1. And I get 0. So if it's 0, how many solutions do we get, right? So if it's 0, that is 1 solution, right? It's not positive, it's not negative, it's 0. That means there's going to be 1 solution. Okay? Going to be 1 solution. One love, one life, right? 1 solution, 1 life. There we go. Are you guys doing okay? I don't see anybody like pulling their hair out or banging their head on the wall. Are we okay with this? Anybody have questions about how I did it? You guys feeling good about discriminant? All right. Okay, so this next one, it's already in I can't speak, I can't think. It's already in standard form. So I'm going to have ax squared plus bx plus c. How did I know it was already in standard form? Everything's already over on one side, and it's equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead here and say, okay, a equals 2, b equals negative 3, and c equals negative 1. My discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So that's going to be negative 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 1. So let's grab that calculator, go to town. Let's see what we have. Quantity of negative 3 squared minus 4 times the quantity of 2 times the quantity of 1. And I get 17. And you know what? This is positive. So that means it's greater than 0, right? So it's positive. So how many solutions is that? That is 2 solutions. Okay, I have 2 solutions. So excellent. Excellent. All right, so so we're gonna keep going here. So I want you guys now we're gonna practice a few more, and then we'll call it a day. Okay, so we're gonna practice a few more and then call it a day. So let's try these last ones, and if you guys can do these last ones, I'm gonna feel confident that you guys are doing well. And that's what we need. We need you guys leaving today feeling confident. Hey, I can do this. And then so tomorrow we can get some practice in, okay? So let's take a look at some problems that we can take a look at. So again, so more practice. Okay, so we're looking at how many solutions. Okay, we're gonna take a look at, let's go x squared plus 4 equals x, we're going to take a look at negative x squared plus 4x minus 4 equals 0. And I want to do a third one here. Let's take a look. Let's say the third one is 1/2 x squared equals 7x minus 1. Okay, and I'm going to give you guys the same amount of time. I think I'm going to give you guys 4 minutes. Okay, because we're getting better at this. So 4 minutes, let's see what we got. Oh, I can't do 4 minutes, can I? Okay, let's scrap this last one. Sorry, I just saw the time. We can't do that. So let's try 2, and let's try doing that in 2 minutes. All right, guys, I'm really sorry. I'm going to run out of time, so I'm just going to quickly go through these. So first one, not in standard form, so I'm going to subtract x from both sides. Okay, so I get x squared minus x plus 4 equals 0. We want to get it to 0. So I have a equals 1, b equals -1, and c equals 4. So if I'm going to check the discriminant, that's b squared minus 4 times a times c. And what is this? This is, so I'm going to type this in really quickly. So -1 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4. Oops, yep. Okay, I get -15. Okay, if I get -15, I get no solution. Okay. So if you take a look here, right, I have a equals 1, b equals -1, c equals +4, b squared minus 4ac, I get -15. That is no solution. The last one, it's already in standard form. I get a equals -1, b equals 4, c equals -4. So that's b squared minus 4 times a times c. I type that into my calculator. I get 4 squared minus 4 times -1 times -4. I get 0, so that is one solution. Hey guys, I'm sorry that I took us to the end. That's all we have today. We'll practice more of this tomorrow and have some more time for that. So take care. I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye, guys.